"Get out of my house!" I shouted before I even realized how loud my voice was. The woman froze mid-step. Her clipboard still clutched in one hand, the master key in the other. She'd just unlocked my front door and walked right in, no knock, no permission, like she owned the place. What she didn't know was that within an hour, she'd be the one in handcuffs standing in my driveway clutching my mother's asthma inhaler while a police cruiser's lights reflected off her face. Her name was Charlotte Williams, president of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA, age 52. Always in that navy blazer and khakis like she was running a corporate office instead of a suburban neighborhood. For 2 weeks, she'd been breathing down our necks, sending violation notices, snapping pictures of our porch and garden. My mom, Barbara, is 70 and has lived in this house for 30 years. She's kind polite, the type who waves to everyone, but that didn't stop Charlotte from acting like we were some sort of criminals. To her, I was just the loser son who'd moved back in after a divorce, the guy without a job living off his mother. She didn't know I was on administrative leave from the sheriff's department pending a routine investigation. I'd spent 15 years in law enforcement, but for now, everyone thought I was unemployed. I let them. Sometimes you learn more when people underestimate you. That morning, when I heard the lock turn, I was sitting at the table drinking coffee. The sound hit like an alarm. Then, Charlotte stepped inside with that holier-than-thou expression. "Mr. Turner," she announced, "this is an emergency compliance inspection under Article 7 of the Community Charter." She didn't even look at me, just started taking pictures of everything: my mom's prescription bottles, the couch, the plants by the window. "Potential safety violations," she muttered. I could feel my blood pressure rising. "You've got no right to be here," I said evenly. "Next time, try asking for consent." She smiled, that fake HOA smile. "Emergency inspections don't require consent, Mr. Turner. I suggest you review the community guidelines." That tone, condescending and smug, I'd heard it from plenty of suspects who thought a little authority made them untouchable. I set my coffee down and pulled out my old leather notebook. In front of her, I wrote the date, time, and words. Unlawful entry. She smirked, like she'd just intimidated another weak homeowner. What she didn't realize was that everything she did was being recorded by a hidden black box camera system I'd installed years ago, an old-school DVR setup my mom never even remembered was still running. The next day, the harassment went digital. My phone started buzzing at 6 a.m. with notifications from the HOA app. 24-hour compliance deadline. Submit property photos or face penalties. Every hour, ping, ping, ping. It was psychological warfare disguised as property management. Then I saw it fresh red paint along the curb in front of our house. Someone had extended the fire lane zone right up to our driveway. My gut told me exactly who'd done it. The paint was still wet. That night I sat with my mom in the kitchen as she tried to act calm. "Maybe she's just trying to keep the neighborhood safe," she said, her voice trembling. I wanted to believe that. But I'd seen her type before, people who weaponize rules to control others. I started building a timeline in my notebook, each visit, each notice, each photo she'd taken. I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was a detective in my own house. Then came the newsletter. A week later, every mailbox got a glossy HOA bulletin featuring a chart about rising violations in Sector 7. Our street. Our house blurred photo, and all was front and center. Charlotte's little propaganda piece had done its job. Neighbors stopped waving. Mrs. Wilson, who used to bring us cookies, crossed the street instead of saying hello. It's funny how fast people believe what they read when it comes stamped with an official logo. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe my mom's new garage color really was too dark. Maybe this was all just misunderstanding. But that thought vanished when my mom got a phone call asking about my financial situation and whether we were coping after the divorce. The caller claimed to be from a community wellness program. They hung up when she asked for a name. That night, I sat in the dark living room staring at the front door Charlotte had used to walk in. I remember thinking maybe we should just sell. Move away, start over. I'd seen too many people lose everything fighting bullies with power. But then I looked at my mom asleep in her chair, her inhaler beside her, and something in me hardened. No, We'd lived here 30 years. This was our home. She wasn't running us out. The next day, our neighbor, Emma Wilson, Mrs. Wilson's daughter, knocked quietly. "Aaron," she whispered, "I think you should know Charlotte's done this to other families. The Smiths, the Johnsons, they all moved out. She finds something small and just keeps pushing until people break." Hearing that flipped a switch. This wasn't about violations, it was about control. I thanked Emma, closed the door, and spent the night cross-referencing every notice timestamp and app ping. The pattern was clear harassment disguised as regulation. Then came the twist. Charlotte didn't just have a power trip, she had a secret. I overheard her muttering once about never letting another tragedy happen like the pool accident. I did some digging. 2 years earlier, a child had drowned at the community pool on Charlotte's watch. The HOA had been sued and Charlotte's reputation barely survived. She'd turned that guilt into obsession. Now she was enforcing safety rules like commandments, using fear as justification for intrusion. 3 mornings later, Charlotte showed up again, this time with a new sidekick. Marcus Thompson, the HOA's safety chair. Both had clipboards. "Mr. Turner, Charlotte said today we'll be conducting an interior safety verification." I hit record on my phone before she even stepped closer. "You are not authorized to enter this property," I said clearly. She ignored me, waved a paper with fresh signatures. "Emergency powers override consent." Then she pulled out the same master key. I let her turn the knob just enough rope to hang herself with and followed as she and Marcus marched inside, taking photos like crime scene techs. "I'm documenting safety hazards," she declared while snapping shots of our hallway. She paused at my mother's bedroom door. "I need to inspect the sleeping area." That's when I stepped in front of her. "Ma'am, stop right there." My voice changed calm, clipped professional. Years of law enforcement reflex surfaced instantly. Marcus hesitated. Charlotte didn't. She reached for the knob again, and right then from the kitchen my mother gasped for air. I heard the inhaler clatter to the floor, then her voice thin and panicked. "I can't breathe." I ran past Charlotte shouting for an ambulance. By the time the paramedics arrived, Mom was wheezing, hard hands shaking. The lead medic, Jennifer, took one look at Charlotte still holding her phone and snapped, "Who authorized photographing this patient's medication?" Charlotte stammered something about community safety. Jennifer cut her off cold. "You're interfering with a medical emergency. Leave the room now, or I'll call the police." The word police made Charlotte pale. She backed toward the door, muttering about protocol. Marcus followed, eyes wide. When the paramedics finally stabilized my mom, Jennifer pulled me aside. "Sir, what these people are doing, this is elder harassment, possibly abuse. You should report it." I nodded slowly. "I intend to." When the ambulance pulled away, lights fading down the street, I walked back into the house past the scattered violation papers and Charlotte's dropped clipboard. I placed my worn leather badge case on the table, the one that had sat unopened for months. I looked at the reflection of the metal shield and thought, time to stop pretending. Charlotte and Marcus were still outside arguing about paperwork. I stepped into the driveway, flipped the badge open, and said calmly, "Ma'am, you're currently engaged in unlawful entry and elder harassment." She blinked, confused. "You're unemployed," she said. "You can't." "I'm Sheriff Aaron Turner. Badge number 2847. I said, pulling my radio from the car. "Dispatch, this is Turner requesting backup for a citizen's arrest at 1543 Maple Drive. Suspect in custody for unlawful entry harassment and interference with medical care." Charlotte's mouth fell open. Her clipboard slipped from her hands, papers scattering across the driveway. Marcus actually took a step back. "You can't arrest me," she shouted. "This is entrapment." Officer Miller arrived minutes later, a guy I'd trained years ago. When he saw me in civilian clothes, his eyebrows shot up, but he went straight into professional mode. I handed him my phone with the recordings, explained the timeline, the false authorizations, the illegal entries. Miller flipped through Charlotte's so-called emergency document, frowning. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "the signature is forged. You don't have any authority to enter private property without consent." Charlotte's last defense crumbled right there. Her voice cracked as she tried to twist the story. "He's the corrupt one. 15 years ago, he covered up a case." I almost laughed. That old investigation had sent a corrupt contractor to prison, and Charlotte had been part of the HOA board that approved his fake roadwork bids. She'd taken kickbacks back then, got immunity for cooperating, and now she was terrified I'd remember. Guess what I did? When Miller read her rights, she still clung to my mother's inhaler like she didn't even realize what she was holding evidence of the very person she'd endangered. The irony was almost poetic. Neighbors started stepping outside as the cruiser's lights flashed red and blue against the houses. Mrs. Wilson whispered to another woman. She broke into their home. The crowd murmured. For the first time in weeks, people were seeing the truth. Miller led Charlotte to the patrol car while I stood silent, notebook in one hand, badge glinting in the other. She twisted around and hissed, "Turner, this isn't over. Everyone will know what kind of cop you really are." I looked at her and said quietly, "They already do." That was it. The cuffs clicked the door shut, and Charlotte Williams, self-appointed queen of Meadowbrook Estates, was driven away under flashing lights. Later, when the DA reviewed the evidence, they found everything forged: signatures, fake violation reports, unauthorized key copies, even records of her entering other homes unannounced. The pattern was textbook abuse of power. She pled guilty to unlawful entry fraud, harassment, and elder abuse. 6 months probation. 200 hours community service banned from any HOA position for life. I didn't stay to watch the sentencing. I'd said my piece that my mother counted her pills out loud now before bed because strangers once photographed them, that neighbors stopped waving until they saw a badge, that privacy shouldn't be a privilege granted by paperwork. Charlotte's reign ended where it began, in the doorway of my mother's house, undone by her own arrogance. Because in the end, power without accountability always collapses under its own weight.